if you are a young writer and you've had the nightmare experience where you sold something but it's been rewritten 1,000 times, and then you've had countless battles that you've lost with the executives and everyone.
Right.
When you go see the finished product, how do you measure your own success? Can the writer take away anything from that experience when they see it on screen and go?
I think so. I mean, I think ultimately.
Is it just that it was produced and that's something right there?
That is certainly, that you become a different kind of writer once you have those things produced. It's definitely important to that, but it's also about realizing what the politics again of realizing the things that are going to be valued and the things that aren't. I mean, it's a tough situation. There are writers out there who sold big specs and have been obsessed on that project. It's part of the reason I like having a lot of things.
Right.
Not that you ever want to be to the point where you throw something out and go, it's never going to get made, forget about it, but it helps when you have other projects. And I know there are writers, really talented writers, with things that I've read, and we all go, whatever happened to them, because they're still focused on getting that thing made. And one of the frustrating things is the beauty of writing, what I love about it, I'm an 18-karat control freak. I love that I can control that world, man. The toughest thing in the world is handing that off to other people. But you have to sort of realize that. And what I do, because it's painful every time you do it, is go fixate back on that world that I can control. And sort of accept that, yeah, they might fuck it up. There might be things that go awry. I can't focus on that. That's that's beyond my control. It's always painful, but those are just sort of the things that facilitate it, I think.
Well, I get asked this question a lot. Like when you try to describe the process in Hollywood, with all this attention to story and the notes that get generated and the voices and what feels like a lot of TLC, why do so many movies suck? Like why do people people go like, well, all that with all that cottage industry of development, all those people with MBAs, like why do they suck so bad?
It's a fundamental misunderstanding of their job, and that is that these people think that they're there to say no. In other words, we're all in this together. The best thing to happen to you, Joe Q, is to get a movie made. It's not going to say on your resume, Joe Q successfully beat down these projects. But it's easier at the end of the day for these guys to go on and go, no, I didn't like the script, rather than fight for it, Whereas I would rather have the guy who's promiscuous, if you will, about it and is going to fight. Those are the guys that stand out. I had an assistant ask me the other day who wanted to be an executive, like, what's the best piece of advice that I could give him from being in enough rooms with these people? And I said, find your opinion and stick with it. If you're in a room and 22 execs are talking about the movies that they saw that weekend and everybody's talking about how much they love Lost in Translation, be the one guy that has the balls to stand up and say, I didn't like it. I didn't get it. It sucked.
Were you that guy?
I'm still that guy. But that's the guy that you're going to remember, even if it's a matter of saying what a schmuck Sheldon Turner is for saying that. I think the people that are valued in this or any industry are the ones who have the balls to stand up and say, no, I don't agree with that. And the ones to fight, hopefully with intelligent acumen about why it's that way. But be that one voice. If you're going to look, there's sheep get sheared, man. If you want to be one of the sheep, I think it's going to be a painful life out here, whether as a writer, as a producer, as anything. Be that person who's stubborn enough to look in the face of the hurricane and not blink.
Now you have a background in political science. Does it come in handy with dealing with what you have to navigate?
Absolutely. I mean, I think I love politics. I still look at it as a rhetorical device. One of the things I do is I read speeches. They're great speeches, and I think there's a way to sort of, in writing those monologues or anything else, the great speech
It might as well
writers,
sound good and carry you away with it.
Yeah, I mean, Mario Cuomo, you look at that's what really got me interested in seeing that 1984 keynote convention speech. Regardless of political affiliations and all the rest, sitting there and seeing the way he moved me as a kid and seeing the way that he moved people through words, that was like the first seminal real memory of things. And that's what I love about politics and the ability to persuade people to do something and why it's so important on the page or anything else. The anaphoras, whatever it is within speech writing, within great speeches, whether it be John F. Kennedy, the speeches that all of us can cite, there is a lyricism to it. There's a poetry to it that I think good writing can go on and have those moments where you can hook an actor with that speech that grabs people. And I think that's what taught me and what still appeals to me about great politics or great politicians is not so much the content of it, it's about the personalities, the way of saying something to get what you want. I mean, LBJ, you look at the way that guy used finesse and sometimes strength to go in and do things. It's like being a great bank robber. Sometimes you got to go hard, man, and sometimes you got to go and use your little devices.
Have you written one of those speeches yet?
Yeah, probably in something that's never gotten. I had one actually in Longest Yard that I don't know if Adam probably never even read it. I think they cut it out. But those are the things that for me were important. And sometimes it takes a while to get to that point. I know the first thing that I sold, I didn't write it to get it made or sell it. And this is an obscure piece of advice I give to writers. Don't write that first thing to get recognized, to sell it or get it made. I mean, that's great. That's why we're all doing this. Write it to show that you have a voice.
Right.
So the first script that I sold, part of me knew it was never going to get made. What I knew was that it was a great forum for me to flex a certain dialogue and to get in people's faces and have a character that would be very verbose and articulate and do those things to show that, yes, I could write. I mean, ultimately, it's the equivalent of sort of being a guy who dunks like time and time again.
Right.
Ultimately, as a writer, you hope that you show you kind of have a post game and you have an outside game as well. But sometimes people only respond to the dunks, and that's one of the unfortunate things about subtlety's lost in Hollywood.
Right.
It's one of the things about because there's such
more of it on
abundance.
television actually these days.
Yeah, truly. I mean, but because of the ADD sort of MTV microwave society, we don't have time, and I'm as guilty as anybody else to sit down and pick out the nuances. So all the time, I'll read things that I miss, and it's got to go on with an executive or a producer who brings home those 10-odd scripts a day, or a weekend, because you are going to miss those things. What they recognize are the hammers, and I think that's sort of the evolution of a writer realizing that, okay, I can't have this scene. I'm going to go with the hammer because they're going to recognize it. But then when we get into production or when we do those things, when it's going to be more of a visual medium, then I can throw in that subtle moment that nobody would realize. Because the fact is most of them don't pick up on it.
Right. Well, there was some speculation that the kind of like the muted response to Cinderella Man at the box office was over. That it was too adult, that it came out in the summer and was too smart and too leisurely paced and just too.
I have a theory.
That the quality was too great for the level of moviegoers. Do you think there's any validity to that, or do you think you can still make a good adult?
I do not. I think you absolutely can. I think what offended me about that movie, and offend is a strong word, is they were telling people what it is. You can't tell anybody in Hollywood.
Here comes this big important movie.
Yeah, here it is. You insert cry here.
Right.
You know, let them find it. People are going to find it, man. One of the greatest pieces of advice is in that first spec. My attorney. And friend told me, you know what, for those scenes, because I had a proclivity of underlining stuff that, like, look at how brilliant I am kind of thing, and he said, don't do that, because what you're going to do is the people that are going to get it are going to be offended that you didn't trust them to get it, and the dummies aren't going to get it anyway. So, just be confident after making a cynical statement like I just made that people don't find subtle. Be confident that the people that count are going to find it.
Right.
And I think that's sort of that's something to take to realizing, like, I'm going to write what I want to write. And I'm gonna hope that the important people, the people that I respect, pick up on those moments, But I had the same reaction to Mr. and Mrs. Smith. There were moments in that movie that were like, look at how cute we are and how much fun it is. And it's just at some point pretentious and forceful, and just like anytime you force somebody to feel something, it's offensive. It's the difference between Jerry Maguire, which makes you come to those moments organically, and Patch Adams, which you see the buttons being pushed. Cry here. Oh, this is a sad moment. Bring out the little kid with the clown nose. Whatever it is, I think in general, audiences reject it.
So what'd you think of Jacob the Liar?
Never saw it, but yeah. Thank you. Now that I'm bashing the entire Robin Williams pantheon, thanks.
How does the pitching process work? Is it like, now I imagine you're successful enough where you don't have to write a spec script if you don't want to. You can go in and just pitch an idea.
Pitching is
are there rules to that? Or?
I would say that pitching, though, I tell this to writers, is better than writing specs for one simple reason. I like writing specs to keep your voice, but the fact of the matter is, if you write the perfect script tomorrow, you sell it on spec, you make an ass load of money, it's going to be changed. Not because it's not perfect, but because people have to
put their imprint on it.
The beauty of the pitch is you can go in and get that imprint. The best, I know I'm selling a pitch when I go in a room and the exec goes, well, what if we had him,
you got him
what
engaged.
If he's actually dyslexic? And then I don't care even if it's the worst note I've ever heard. I'm like, that's great. Well, you didn't think of that. That's fantastic. Because then you're bringing them into it, And that's sort of the dance that goes on in those things. Pitching's an art, though. I mean, and it's why, like, certain people hate going in rooms. It's a good reason why people are
like, how long should they be?
15 minutes. I think people tune out after that. I think that it's more or less the key to a pitch is that concept, man, because you got to understand the system. You always want to go to the guy closest to write the check. But if you're not at that guy, if you're not sitting in Stacey Snider's office, and let's face it, she's not going to hear a pitch unless you have Tom Cruise to your right, then you've got to rely on an exec to go down the hall, and after you just pitched your heart out, capsulize
repitch it. That exec has to repitch it.
And he's got, 30 seconds. I think writers would be horrified, man. If they actually saw the process, the pitch went great,
Right.
leave the room, let's stay on the exec as he goes down the hall and crucifies what you just poured your heart out.
Right.
So it's got to be something, we talk about high concept, that's easily transferable, easily translatable from your sort of idea to them. Something that you can just go, okay, here's the giant rock, here's this, here's what's interesting about it, because all the nuances that you just threw out in a room are going to be lost as far as getting that green light or getting the thumbs up from the exec to go buy it.
Right. Well, I remember when I was an executive, what struck fear into my heart is when they a writer would come in with a 40-page treatment this thick and read from it, and you're just trapped as they turn the pages.
I've always wanted to do that as sort
Right.
of a threat and then toss it aside. But I think there's a sizzle that comes with selling that pitch, and it's a cult of personality, man. And I think the good pitchers there's often people that we all read about selling these unbelievable pitches,
Right.
and then you read the script and it's awful.
Yeah.
I mean, ideally you want to have the voice in the room, the voice on the page.
Do you ever resort to the "it's this meets that" thing that was?
You have to. I mean, I was the guy who came out here and I was like, I'm never doing that shit. That's horrible. But you kind of have to. And at some point it does help, because that's what I'd rather be the guy telling them what it is than leave it to the exec to go down and pitch it out as, Out of Africa meets, Biodome
Spaceballs.
or Spaceballs.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you enjoy the pitching process?
I do. I like it a lot. I think it's a fun sort of theatrical thing. There's overselling, but there's also it is a collaborative enterprise. So involving an exec in that way, and I think some of the ideas that I really like come out in pitching out a story, in realizing something on my own, or having somebody go, gee, that doesn't make sense, or whatever it is. I think there's definitely a lot of benefits that come through that.
What's the most important aspect of preparing the pitch to go into the studio? Do you have to have the whole story?
I usually beat out the whole story. And then the toughest part is determining since you do have a finite amount of time, since you do have those 10, 15 minutes, I think, to hit it, you've got to pick out the things that are going to play, those movie moments. You never want to break it down to set piece. I mean, I know there are writers out there who go, here are the big 3 set pieces, and I think that's kind of soulless.
Well, I've had the opposite experience too, where it's too vague. Where a writer will come in and it'll be like 30 seconds, and then you'll ask, well, what happens in this? Well, I don't have that yet.
Right.
Or how does it end? I don't have that yet.
It's always, what it is?
Yeah.
It's the fallacy of, I read Art Linson book about how he sold the David Mamet movie The Edge, or what, I forget what they called it. I think it was originally.
It ended up being The Edge.
It ended up being The Edge.
It might have been The Bear before.
Yeah.
But there was another bear. So
they talked about, though, selling it in the room, they didn't know what it was. Going in. I think, that's such a rare occurrence.
Yeah.
Kiva Goldsmith talks about, at least it's a story I heard, he might dispute it, but I had heard that right after he got his Academy Award, went out to pitch his passion project the next week, and it didn't sell.
Right.
Now, if that's not humbling, at the end of the day, you just hope you get lucky with these things. And one thing I do remember about law school is this theory of natural law. Natural law basically said that however well prepared you are for a case, it's going to be more contingent upon what the judge had for breakfast that morning than anything you can pitch out. And in a way, that's a daunting thing to throw out, but it's kind of the same way in reading.
It's going to be what it's going to be.
Yeah, I mean, if Mike DeLuca just got in a fight with his girlfriend before he's going to read my script, then maybe he's not going to be in the greatest of moods when he reads it.
Do you dread the notes when they come, like the studio notes, or are you at peace with it at this point?
I'm at peace with it for the most part. I will say, there was a project early on I got 15 pages of notes on. Here's the thing that you realize. If you do your job, you're going to have the same line in every note, which is, this is a great jumping off point. We're very excited about this script. And then you're like, fantastic. And then you realize there are 15 pages of notes.
Right.
So it's sort of picking the things out of that. Now, great notes. I just got actually some good notes on a project I'm working on that I thought, gee, that's smart. I look forward to implementing those. By the same degree, there are a few things in there that I was like, that's kind of a little masturbatory and a little predictable and a little that's in the blueprint book that I'm sure is somewhere. You can break down notes. They say there are 5 storylines that we're continually telling in different ways.
What do you think of those
notes?
What do you think of those books and seminars and?
For me, they never work. I mean, I think they're teaching people to all sort of rely on the same things. Find this thing, and ultimately, how can you go to a seminar taught by this valued professorial guy who's never had a movie made, who's never written a script that's any good? I just don't buy. I don't think you can get away with it.
Has Robert McKee? Does he have a produced credit?
I don't know that Robert McKee has a produced credit. I don't know. That's exactly it.
What did Sid Field do? Or what does he do?
I think I saw him in the subway. That subway outfit, right outside on Westwood Boulevard. He was waving at me. But I mean, I think some people do get something out of those projects. At least they feel like they do. It's the placebo effect of it.
Why do you think you could take a notes memo from Paramount or one from Warner's or one from Universal, and they all read like the same guy wrote it.
Yeah.
We feel that the draft has come a long way. We think that you did a great
Right.
job,
Yeah,
and then the attack starts. Like, where did that format come from?
I don't know. I think it's smart in a way. Like ultimately, if you're gonna break up with a girl, you kind of want to lead with the like, this is the greatest experience of my life, but beat it, you know.
Yeah.
But and it's the same kind of thing. Always lead with a compliment. I think that's part of it.
But now it's starting to sound really robotic.
It sounds absolutely robotic. You can't tell, and I think that's sort of it's real. I mean, I'd hate to be that exec who just said that one ambitious.
Well, these poor kids are like these creative executives. All they do, they take home 300 scripts a week and write notes on every single one.
Yeah, and that's what you have to realize. I mean, we talk about like how do you get into the trade, whatever it is. Well, you got to have a conduit, because the fact of the matter is, if you don't, blind submissions don't work. You know, if you just send a script into Endeavor or CA, it's going to be read, if you're lucky, by a 22-year-old semi-retarded kid, you know? So it's like, ultimately you want to find that conduit who's going to say, gee, I read this thing, it's really good, man, you should read it. So at least you can kind of have that entryway. You've overcome one of the barriers to entry, you know?
Right. How does something like The Longest Yard go from like the studio or Sandler saying, let's remake this, to the premiere?
Right. It depends on, for Longest Yard, the process was essentially, Adam was flying back from a trip and watched the movie and said, God, what a great movie that is.
Private or commercial?
Film. Of course, private. Come on. And went to Paramount, found out Paramount made
That's
the
another
original.
difference between actors and writers.
Yeah, by the way, back in the tournament in 34C in the back next to two obese women. But for those guys, they went to Paramount and said, we want to remake the movie. Of course, Paramount said, well, is Adam going to star? And they said, no, he's not. So I guess Paramount was like, all right, we'll do it anyways. And then you go through at that point.
But you know what they do? They go like, but maybe we'll get him.
Maybe we'll get him. Yeah. Exactly. So they did the maybe we'll get him. And then at that point, I had to go on the cattle call. So they were meeting with writers. For me, my cachet at the time was that I played football in college, that I knew the game.
Right.
They're big, sports fans.
Just that you knew football.
Was big. I mean, that's the ridiculous part. And I don't even know that Jack's ever read one of my scripts. I think it was more about going in the room, connecting with Jack, and him feeling like I was somebody who could take directions, who understood the sport, who was easy to get along with. And that's not, writers like to believe that it's all about like what they read. The fact is, most people don't read samples. They're familiar with names. They know, all right, I liked him in a room. We'll make him, write this or that. But that, I think, ultimately is what it came down to. Is connecting with those guys, getting along with them, talking sports with them, knowing that they wouldn't have to translate when they said it's 3rd and 14, and I wouldn't go, what does that mean? So that's the sort of reality of it. And then it's just from there, working with those guys. They're incredibly collaborative, and just having them be the 800-pound gorilla that they can be to get movies made. Right.
Were they involved with you in the genesis of the story? Like, how hands-on or hands-off were they?
Very hands-on. Very hands-on. I mean, at the point where they wanted to be, again, very reverential to the original. Right. But also about my original pitch was very different than deviated a lot more than what the original, just because that's sort of what you do. You realize, all right, we're remaking a movie. How beholden do you have to be to those original things?
Was that a big concern, the cult around that original film?
That was a huge concern for those guys. I mean, they very much wanted the ESPN audience to believe, the guys who remembered the note, who remembered the scenes and all those things. And I've had a lot of people come up to me and say, I can't believe you killed off Chris Rock. How could you do that? It's like, I didn't do it. The original screenwriter did. But if you liked it, I'll take credit for it. If you didn't, I'll blame him. No, but I mean, it's finding that balance. The cult following, the people that really remember that movie, and look, it's a flawed movie, and that's why I think it made for a good remake, because there are all sorts, and it was very easy to write because of it. Not easy to write, but it made the process easy, because there were all sorts of setups in the original that were never paid off. So just in the basics of, this is why this guy did this, and this is going to be his comeuppance in the third act. It was fluid, and I think, but also some of the more difficult process was sort of like, all right, everybody's expecting the scene where Paul Crewe throws the ball into the linebacker's balls. Well, why don't we do it into the ref's balls? Now it seems like semantics, but those are the kinds of things that at least feel a little different about. You can't do the same things that you would do in 1973 in a prison now. So it's about finding those things, whether it be technology or anything else, and still incorporating, people were going to be looking for the instead of he shit his pants now, he broke my fucking nose. Whatever it is, it's finding that transition. And hopefully like giving a little salute to the old movie, but also saying this is our version.
Right, and I imagine because you had Jack and Adam as your 800-pound gorillas, you didn't see the studio a lot, or they
No, we didn't. I mean, we had the meetings once in a while to get in there, but they were really protective like that. And I think the good producers, I'm working on a project now, and the exec on it is fantastic. I love her because she acts as a buffer between the studio.
Right.
And not that I don't like the studio, but she's just sort of the conduit. She's the one who can check in and go, hey, we're doing great, all this. And they're going to listen to her more than they're going to listen to me. So it's valued.
What's coming up next for you, Sheldon?
I'm working on a couple things I'm really excited about right now. I'm writing Magneto, which is an offshoot of the X-Men franchise, the Marvel character, which is great. It's the first sort of period piece of the Marvel franchise. Really excited about that. You know, what's better than killing Nazis? That's basically Magneto going and resurrecting revenge. And then I'm working on a project for Jennifer Aniston and Meryl Streep, a book that I'm adapting for Warner Bros. And then there's a pitch that I'm...
Warner Bros?
Warner Bros, yeah, that's pretty bad. Yeah. If I start using the term ankled, then just kick me out.
Warner Bros.
Warner Bros. And then I'm writing a movie for Leonardo DiCaprio to star sort of a modern day Straw Dogs.
Okay.
So it's one of the nice things also, though, as long as I knew in writing Longest Yard who my God was. I knew who I had to please, I knew that if I made Adam and Jack happy, I was going to be okay. The nice thing about working with stars, or at least or heavyweight producers, is knowing that as long as I can identify that one person I can please, then I think it facilitates.
So it would make a difference to you if your agent called and said, we have this great idea, came to us from a studio, but there's just the idea and the executive and nothing else and nobody.
Absolutely. I turn things down all the time because there are producers I will not work with, who probably don't even know who I am. But I know from experience, from talking to other people, I know that they're weak producers. I know that they're going to leave me out to dry. So even if it's painful too, because sometimes there are ideas I like, there are books, there are properties I love, and then invariably I'm on the phone going, who's the producer on it, who's the exec on it?
But you sense that it may not turn into a movie because of the people
not
involved or involved.
Right. By the same degree, there are projects that maybe aren't as great, that don't seem in the static sense as fantastic, but you hear the producer involved, you hear the exec involved.
It's coming out next Christmas or
exactly,
summer.
Exactly. It's predetermined. So yeah, it definitely makes a difference.
Has screenwriting gotten easier for you over the years? Is it?
I don't think it's ever easy. I think the political side hopefully is getting easier. I don't think it ever should be easy. There are projects I think if I don't feel challenged enough by, I'm more apt to not do.
Right.
I want to constantly do those things that are going to scare me, and I don't think it's just by nature ever going to be that thing that, God, it's easy. I mean, I think it's the difference between sort of being a triathlete and being a basketball player. Like one is sort of you're challenging yourself continuously, and the other is you're relying on other people. Now ultimately you have to rely on other people, but in that room alone, man, you're challenging yourself.
Right.
And if you're not up for that, it will be a painful process.
Right. Well, we want to thank you, Sheldon, for spending the time with us
today.
Brian. Thank you all as well. Please remember to check out the other episodes in our series, and remember, it starts with you. So the next written by credit could be yours. I'm Mike DeLuca.